Hey, you know what time it is? Neil Ratner here with a story. So today is Eddie Van Halen's 65th birthday. And in honor of Eddie, I thought I would tell you a few things about Van Halen that you might not know. But as usual, a little background first. All right, so Eddie's father was a Dutch musician who moved his family from Amsterdam to Pasadena, California in 1962. Now, both Eddie and his older brother Alex learned to play the piano as children, starting at the age of about 6. And Eddie, although he did take piano lessons, he never learned to read or write music, but actually learned to play from watching and listening. And ultimately, he didn't find the piano challenging enough. Now, Alex didn't either. He had already moved on to the guitar, so Eddie took up playing the drums. But according to Eddie, while I was out throwing my papers, he was practicing my drums. He got better than I did, and I said, okay, you play my drums, and I'll pick up your guitar. It went on from there. I'd say I really didn't start playing guitar and getting into lead guitar and stuff like that until the Cream came out, and that was mid-60s and stuff like that when the heavy guitar thing started to happen. Now, the brothers had always played together, and in 1972, they formed a band called Genesis, featuring Eddie as lead vocalist guitarist, Alex on drums, and a friend of theirs named Mark Stone on bass. Now, they initially rented a sound system from David Lee Roth, but decided to save money by letting him join as lead vocalist, even though Roth had previously auditioned and he had been rejected. But you know how it is in those days. You don't got money, this guy's got a sound system, he's in the band. All right. Now, so David Lee Roth. But by 94, the band decided to replace Stone. So Michael Anthony, who was the bassist and lead vocalist from a local band named Snake, was auditioned. And following an all-night jam session, he was hired to play bass guitar and backing vocals. And then you had the setup for Van Halen. Okay. Now, the band got their big break when in mid-1977, label head Mo Austin and producer Ted Templeman of Warner Brothers saw Van Halen perform at a place called the Starwood in Hollywood. Now, although the audience was small, the two were so impressed with the band that within a week, they offered them a recording contract. Now, producer Ted Templeman was very important in finding a direction for the band on the first album. And according to Van Halen, what he managed to do was put our live sound on a record. I mean, a lot of people have to do a bunch of overdubs to make it sound full. It's a lot easier to make a lot of instruments sound full than a guitar, bass, and drums. That's where Ted comes in. He knows his shit. He's the man. Van Halen is 3 instruments and voices with very few overdubs, very live sounding. Ted Templeman, the producer, and Don Landy, the engineer, they weren't quite sure of what we wanted. They weren't too familiar with our sound. We sifted through all the songs with Ted, and we picked out what we wanted to do. Ted Templeman, a well-known producer from various segments of the rock and roll industry. Very important guy. Okay. Now, their debut album, Van Halen, was one of the most commercially successful debuts in rock history, and the band has gone on to sell more than 80 million albums. Eddie, of course, is considered by most one of the greatest rock and roll guitarists of all time, and he considers Eric Clapton his greatest influence. Now, according to Van Halen, I used to love the way he played. He was real smooth and a lot of feeling. Every review I ever read of the album or my playing, it's always Blackmore, Beck, and Page influences, but I never really sat down and copped their licks like I did Clapton. I guess a lot of people think I sound sound like Beck or Blackmore because I do use the bar and they do also, so it kind of gets the same kind of sound. The only thing Blackmore got me hooked on was the whammy bar because I never really liked the way he played that weird staccato stuff. But I feel a lot of my licks are different than theirs, like the wide stretch things I do. I try and make it sound a bit different. And of course, his tapping, which he didn't invent, but which he helped perfect, definitely gave him an edge on what he did with the guitar. Okay, now, Eddie's talents as a guitarist were extremely highly valued, and he was involved in quite a few projects outside of Van Halen, starting with the guitar solo on my friend Michael Jackson's song Beat It. He also did guitar and backing vocals on Brian May's Starfleet project. He did the guitar solo on Roger Waters' song Lost Boys Calling, and many, many other things that you've heard are actually Eddie Van Halen. But after years of abusing his body, Eddie's been plagued by a series of health issues over the years, including tongue cancer in the early 2000s, which he beat. But according to recent reports and his old bandmate David Lee Roth, Eddie is again battling cancer, and we all wish him well. All right. So that's it, Eddie Van Halen, truly one of the great, great guitarists. I hope he gets well, and I hope he continues to produce more great guitar solos like Eruption, for example. Probably one of the greatest guitar solos of anybody in history. Okay, I have an announcement to make. This Wednesday, my next podcast will go live, and my guest is a very interesting British journalist named Tony Fletcher. And Tony really created one of the first and most popular fanzines in the UK, and he was a musician. He went on to be a very well-respected author with bios of Keith Moon, R.E.M., The Clash, and a history of the music scene in New York from like the 20s to the 70s. Really interesting interview. You can find it on the Woodstock Podcast Network on Spotify. I will post a link when it goes live on Wednesday. Also, Spotify, 100 shares. The song goes on Spotify from my posts on Facebook. My book, if you're interested, neilratnerrockdoc.com. Hit the buy the book. I'll autograph it for you. There's an audio book on Amazon and Audible, actually. Audiobook on Audible. And that's pretty much it for today. Okay, so I hope you're having a great weekend. Have a great rest of the weekend. And check me out all over the place. You know where to find me. Podcast live on Wednesday. All right, and I'll see you real soon. Keep on rocking now, and we'll see you.